Sara Sinclair is an oral historian, writer, and educator of Cree, Ojibwe, and settler descent. Sinclair teaches in the Oral History Master's Program at Columbia University. She has contributed to the Columbia Center for Oral History Research's COVID-19 Oral History, Narrative and Memory Archive, Obama Presidency Oral History, and Robert Rauschenberg Oral History Project. She has conducted oral histories for the Whitney Museum of American Art, New York City Department of Environmental Protection, and the International Labor Organization, among others. She is co-editor of Robert Rauschenberg and Oral History, published in 2019. One of the narrators of the book being discussed this evening, Althea Guiboche, Métis, Ojibwe, Salteaux. After experiencing homelessness with her own young children, Althea became a community advocate for Winnipeg's most vulnerable populations. She started the organization Got Bannock, which serves meals to hundreds of people in response to the constant need she saw around her. Althea helped to develop a definition of Indigenous homelessness in Canada that considers the structural issues contributing to the disproportionate number of Indigenous people among Canada's homeless communities. Gladys Raddick is a tireless grassroots advocate for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Following the disappearance of her own niece, Tamara Lynn Chipman, Gladys co-founded Walk for Justice, an organization created to fight for the families of the missing and murdered. With Walk for Justice, Gladys has crossed the country 7 times and has spoken to thousands of families whose lives have been impacted by violence perpetuated against Native women and girls. The book, How We Go Home, Voices from Indigenous North America, a collection of Indigenous voices processing the way their lives have been shaped by loss, injustice, and resilience, is the subject of this evening's talk. Please join me in welcoming editor Sara Sinclair, narrator Althea Guiboche, and narrator Gladys Raddick.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction, Megan. And thank you very much, Gladys and Althea. It's always an honor to be spending this time with you, and I really appreciate you both joining me this evening. I want to say that I'm thinking of you, Robert, and I hope that you're feeling better soon, and I look forward to the next time that you can join me for an event like this. So thank you all so much. Good evening. It's such a pleasure to be in Seattle tonight, although I'm actually sitting in very frosty Brooklyn, wrapped in 2 blankets by this large window. I've been watching the snow come down all day. It's beautiful, but it is wintry. I'm glad that I'm somewhere that's prepared for these conditions, and I've been thinking a lot about friends and relatives in Texas as well. Anyways, thank you so much for being here to spend the evening talking a little bit about this book, How We Go Home. Both Althea and Gladys are narrators in the book, which is an oral history collection that shares contemporary first-person stories in the long and ongoing fight to protect Native land, rights, and life. 12 Indigenous narrators share their stories that are shaped by loss, injustice, resilience, and the struggle to share space with settler nations. How We Go Home is the latest book in the series from Voice of Witness, which is a human rights oral history nonprofit that works to amplify the voices of people impacted by injustice. Voice of Witness provided editorial guidance and funding for this project, and the book was published by Haymarket Books, an independent publishing house in Chicago. The book is available for purchase now on the Haymarket website and also with our bookstore partner this evening. This oral history book is very accessible for readers of all backgrounds, including middle and high school students. And Voice of Witness has also developed a free set of lesson plans for the book with Navajo educator Suzanne Methot, which educators can now download directly from the Voice of Witness website. So this project has been long in the making for me. It began about 7 years ago. It was my oral history master's thesis project. I came to New York City to study oral history. And for that work, I interviewed specifically Native Americans from reservation communities who left their reservations to attend elite academic institutions and then moved home again to work for their nations. And very quickly, while I was pursuing that work, I started to envision a book. Because these narrators were such incredible educators, historians, And they were able to narrate North American history in such a unique and new way. Universal issues were well described, but also they were able to speak to the very specific histories of their tribes and their nations. So when I graduated, I started to shop around this book proposal and approached Voice of Witness with particular enthusiasm because I really love how accessible their books are. They're not scary academic presses. They're designed with the idea that people, a mainstream readership, young audience can engage with the books. They're beautifully designed, and I think they're really inviting. So I very much hope that Voice of Witness would agree to pursue this work with me. And they were interested in pursuing the project, although they wanted to expand the central question away from a specific focus on education. So together, we came up with this new central question, which really guided the work that I did over the following few years. And that new central question became, what is it like to be a citizen of a nation within another nation whose dominant social, political, and economic interests are so fundamentally at odds? So Voice of Witness works to amplify voices of people impacted and fighting against injustice. And collaborating, we knew that we wouldn't be able to illuminate every injustice that's occurring across Indigenous North America in the space of a book, which might contain 12 to 15 narratives. But we knew that we absolutely wanted to include some issues which we believed to be most universal. We wanted to include stories that could speak to the legacy of the residential school system in both the United States and Canada. We wanted to include stories that would highlight the high rates of Native kids in care today. We wanted to include stories that spoke to issues around environmental injustice, resource extraction, treaty violations, barriers to accessing healthcare and education, and the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. So from 2017 to 2019, I traveled. I think Althea might have been the first person that I interviewed on my first trip after this project was greenlit with Voice of Witness. I flew to Winnipeg. That was where I wanted to start the project because that's where my own Native family is. My father is Peguis Nation, and he grew up in Selkirk and Manitoba. So that felt like the right place to start the project. And I remember arriving in Winnipeg and going to my hotel, and probably had a couple hours to sort of freshen up before meeting Althea, who's such a powerhouse and was such a wonderful, wonderful person and place to start this whole project. And I met Gladys a few months later on my next interviewing trip out to BC, a very different trip because I brought along my 2-year-old son and my sister. And we enjoyed an afternoon. I got to spend some time chatting with Gladys alone, and then we all visited a little bit in the car. My sister Minaway got to meet Gladys, and my son Julian also had the pleasure of a very brief encounter with Gladys. He's been on many, many cool trips towards putting together this book, and it's too bad he will not remember all of it, but I remember, so that's very sweet. Anyways, it was Manitoba, and then British Columbia, and then the American Southwest, traveling through Phoenix and the Navajo Nation and Santa Clara Pueblo, and then to the Dakotas, the Rosebud Indian Reservation, Cheyenne River Indian Reservation, and then up to Six Nations of the Grand River Reserve when I was visiting family in Toronto and also interviewing in New York City, where I currently live. And the reason that I pursued this project, sort of twofold, for settler readers, many times people have asked me to explain some of the negative representations of Native people in the media. And I don't remember where I first heard it. I think it was in a Canadian context, but there's this idea that if Native people only get covered in the press if they're one of the 4 Ds, if they're drumming, dancing, drinking, or dying, there isn't a good amount of representation of the positive work that Indigenous people are engaged with throughout North America. You only see snapshots of people in sometimes the bleakest or the hardest or the most desperate moments of their lives, as reported in the mainstream press. And oral history really allows us to know so much more about a person, and really allows us to understand the conditions of people's lives within a much longer history and within a much broader social context. And for Native readers, I was really motivated by a story that one of my narrators, Ashley Hemmer, shared with me when I was interviewing towards my thesis. She was one of the people that I interviewed for that. And she told me that when she was a youth, when she was probably middle school age, she became really interested in learning about the Holocaust because it helped her to understand the conditions that she was seeing around her in a different way. It helped her to understand the intergenerational trauma that she was seeing and the conditions that she saw around her. She was suddenly able to appreciate within a larger historical context. And that it really served as an aha moment for her that inspired her to pursue the education that today enables her to serve as administrator for her tribe. And she's really worked to dramatically change the conditions on the Fort Mojave reservation for the next generation of kids coming up. So that is a lot from me. And I much prefer to listen than to speak, which is why I'm an oral historian. So I very much want to invite now Gladys and Althea into this conversation. And I wanted to start with you, Althea. Can you hear me okay?
Hi, yes, I can.
Great, hi. So Althea, in our conversation and in your narrative in the book, you spoke about your childhood in Duck Bay, your family's move to Calgary, and your own journey to start Got Bannock in Winnipeg years later. Can you share those stories with us today?
Yeah. I grew up a lot. My mom was born in Duck Bay, as were my grandmother and grandfather. So we grew up there, and we had quite the rich life. Not a rich life, but I mean, I'm traditionally Métis life. My grandfather had he had about 6 big horses, 8 ponies, 100 cows, 100 chickens, goats and pigs, and at one point we had even when my grandfather went hunting, he realized he killed the mom and father geese. So he actually found the nest, and he brought the eggs home, and he put them with the chickens, and then they hatched, and they came back every year. So we had our own flock of wild geese. So so it was really awesome. Good memories. We went to Kettle Hills every summer, and kind of that my family all picked blueberries as an income during the summer. And yeah, it really gave me a lot of memories. And from that, I learned from watching my family was how to make sure that your fellow neighbor is okay, that they're not starving, they got food. And then whenever they'd go hunting, and they'd always go to big parties, they would bring back like 10 moose or whatever, and they would share. They would share with these families that had large number of kids. They would go and drop off meat, and of course we always had eggs from the cows. My grandpa sold cream. At one point, I remember we even had a gas tank and a taxi. We had a little store. We had our own park. So it was really really gave me a lot of fundamental holistic traits to fall back on, teachings. And then while we were living there, my uncle Arnold drowned. He went hunting. Actually, I think they went, yeah, in the boat, and it was a stormy day. The boat ended up capsizing, and then he was missing in the water for throughout the whole winter. And then when it started thawing out, they found him. So we laid him to rest, and it broke the adults. We went from that life. Everybody left because there was just too many memories. We went to Calgary, and the adults we went from that to poverty. Everybody was on welfare. They were sick, bedridden, having heart attacks. My mom had shingles, and And so it was just a completely different life. Gone was the freedom, just jump on the horses, go, galloping around the countryside and swim all day, and then that to a city, to poverty. I remember being hungry a lot. But from my upbringing, I was very resourceful. So what we did was we would go looking for elderly people, notice that they had, like, a crabapple tree or whatever, and we'd knock on the door and we'd offer, so would you like us to clean some of these apples? They would say, pick all you want, clean them. And then in return, like, I would just ask for, like, if they had a sandwich, and then they'd make us lunch while we were working. And then we got to know elders, and came to helping them. So it was really a really nice lifestyle. It was very challenging. Um, my mom, as I said, she had shingles, so she was bedridden, and she I was talking to her one day, and she goes, just trying to figure out how to get an income, how to make money, and then she started selling Avon. So she said, if only I could get these brochures out. And I said, well, what do you need to do? She goes, I just need to, get them to people. My contact information's on the back. And I said, I'll do it. So I piled up my little red wagon, took her brochures. I came back. I need more, Mom. I came back. I need more, over and over. So at what I made her the top Western District Avon lady of Canada at that time. And she went to get her award. She said it was a huge fancy ball. People were in ball gowns and just dazzled, right? And she said, I walked in there in my jeans and t-shirt, got my award, and I left. She said there was older ladies in mini skirts and just big makeup and just dripping jewelry. She goes, I had one of those moments where I was like, what am I doing here? So we laughed about that, and she never really quite got over shingles. Like, if she was around somebody with chicken pox, it would flare up her shingles immediately. And then we came home after about a year, went back to, like, Camperville, resumed our life. And then, to the Godbanic story, I was living in Winnipeg. Actually, that was after I went homeless. I was living out in Oker. I had 3 babies under the age of 3, 5 altogether at home. And the flooding of Manitoba happened. And while my house wasn't flooded, there was a lot of water in the land, and it flooded out the basement, which then broke the sewer line. And so at that point, I had to, like, get out of that house. And then nobody wanted to help me. I went to as many social serving agencies, Manitoba Housing Assistance, Red Cross, on and on. Not one of them helped me. They didn't refer me. They didn't advise me. They did nothing. So I fell through all the gaping cracks of the system. And so I finally was able to find a house after 11 weeks of homelessness with all these children. I stayed with my sister. I stayed with a friend. And, like, you're basically invading someone's personal privacy, personal routine, and eventually they don't want you there, and they treat you like it, and they make sure, you're a burden. And it got to be quite abusive towards me. So that caused a lot of, hurt, and a lot of triggers from that. After about a year in Dauphin, I was just so depressed. I was drinking a lot. I was, just trying to cope, and I felt suicidal. I just felt like a piece of crap. And so I started kind of getting around to the anger part, eh? and And at that point, I decided I can't stay in Dauphin. Like, I'm self-destructing here. I'm not, there's nothing here for me. That Nobody comes to visit. I had no supports, basically Head Start the Head Start program was my only contact to the world. So I went to Winnipeg, and I moved back to Winnipeg, I should say. And before that, like when I left a while ago, you would see maybe one person here or there, on the street asking for money, and in the where the lights are, right on the intersections. And then when I came back there, oh my God, it was like at every intersection, all over the city, in every area. There was, and that was not like that before. And then so I noticed all these homeless people, and I was like, oh my God, like this is a bigger problem. And so I started processing. I started writing. I became a writer at that time. Started processing all these feelings and this hurt and anger, also losing my father. So I was trying to get over that. And then I was just, trying to figure stuff out. I started making bannock. I started practicing bannock because like I was wishing for bannock one day. I was eating eggs, and then I got upset at myself, and I'm like, "What's wrong with me? I'm a neat eater. Should be bannock all over this house, you know." So I vowed right then and there. That's it. I said, "Why am I? I'm always making excuses. Oh, it's no good. It's too hard. Blah blah blah." So I decided. I vowed right then and there. I'm gonna make bannock. I'm gonna get all this stuff, and I'm gonna practice and practice and practice until it's good. So that's what I did. At one point, I had like 50 birds that just would never leave my yard because this bannock would come out, and I'm like, oh, it looks horrible. Damn it, I'll never get it. And I would throw it out the door. And then all of a sudden, I realized that there was a bunch of birds fighting and I was like, what's going on? So I realized that, well, if the birds like it, then can't be that bad. So it gave me motivation to keep going, to keep trying. I even at one point invoked my ancestors. I held up my hands and said, all the best bannock makers, get in my hands. I want to learn bannock. Help me out. And so I had a friend over one day. We visited. She did her laundry. I was making her bannock buns and giving her some soup stuff, like some food staples just to get her by. And we were driving. I had $14 to my name. I pulled over, put it in a tank, and then these two guys came up from out of nowhere. It was minus 50. They were inadequately dressed. They didn't have hats, scarves, or mitts, and oh my God, they were just convulsing with the cold. Like the shivers were so hard that their whole body shook. And they were like, excuse me. And I was like, from out of nowhere here, I thought I was watching my back pretty good at that point. And he said, oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was just wondering if you would happen to have any money or food. And I said, oh, I got $14. Hey, I said, but I got bannock in the back. So I opened the back of my van and I said, buddy, I'm going to give them some of your bannock. She said, go ahead. So I handed them like 3 bannock buns each. They were still warm from the oven. They just devoured them immediately. And then I searched through her food staples, and I found a can of, like a meal soup in a can kind of thing. It was all made, and all you had to do was heat it up. And I was like, oh, that looks gross, but here, do you want it? I'm sorry, it's not hot. Are you going to be able to cook it? And then they assured me that they would find a store owner that would let them in to heat up their soup. And then I came away from that and I was like, oh my God. And in the meantime, all this Idle No More stuff was happening. So I went to the rally, the round dance at Polo Park. I took my mom, who was a traditional woman, and she sang the honor song for Chief Teresa Spence, who had fasted in Ontario. And so that's how I started. I was just so motivated by this Idle No More, and I was always one to take a stand, and to me that was just so profound. Like, oh my God, I gave them bannock in that soup. Oh, if it was my soup, oh my God, it would have been just deadly. So that's what I did. I went home and I was just like, woo, just oh my God, I was just so excited. So I made chili, really good chili. Like that was my specialty. Took it out, bannock buns, and I approached these people on Main Street, right by the the Main Street Project, or Salvation Army and all that. Excuse me. And I approached them and I said, "Hey, do you want some bannock and chili?" They were like, "Bannock," and then they were started eating. Hey, holy, who do you work for? And I said, "Nobody." Then I thought, oh, that sounds stupid. I mean, for me. And then I was like, oh, no, that sounds selfish. Jeez. I mean, for you, like, I mean, for us, like you mean from our people? I said, in honor of the village we once had. Oh my God, sister, this is so good. And they were like, and that became my motto for my program, was in honor of the village we once had. And it just, came out like I wasn't planning it. And then the people started calling me Bannock Lady, because there was a sandwich lady, there was a pizza lady, but I was the Bannock Lady. So, and then I just came, the momentum just kept rolling. Um, I would see all these sickening, detrimental, disgusting headlines. I would call the papers like, how dare you? Like they called a homeless man who had died, they called him the king of sniff after he died. I was like, are you kidding? The king of, like, he was a homeless man. How is he a king? How dare you? You change that, and I started getting mad at the media, holding their words to them, making them amend stories. And then next thing you know, every time there was something that happened, Althea, I want to know if you want to have a comment. And it just kept going on. And then I started feeding the people, and that just continued to grow and grow. I started with 19 servings of chili and bannock, and then it grew to 100, and then I had to go to 150. And then at one point we were feeding every lunch. I was cooking for 300 lunches. And so I'd make 6 big bannocks, village-sized bannocks. They were 24 inches in length, and like really big, like, and people would be like, "Oh, what's your recipe?" Well, you take half the bag, pour it into the bowl. This is not a at home recipe. So so yeah, it's been quite a journey. I did so many amazing like different things. Like um one of my childhood friends passed away, and he just said, quit waiting for the right time, just do it, just get up and do it. And so I did. So I did a lot of different things, just because I'm tired of waiting to be ready. And nobody asked me if I was ready and willing to be homeless, but it happened. So I turned all the negativity, I turned my hurt and anger into fuel, kind of thing. And I did my best. I worked hard. I don't even know how many people I fed. I must have made bannock to the moon and back. Yeah, so it's been quite a journey. And now I'm doing my own thing, just making sure that my kids are taken care of, and living out in Dauphin these days.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Althea.
Yes.
I could listen to you speak for many, many, many more minutes and hours, but I want to invite Gladys to join us as well. Gladys, in our conversations, you spoke about your life experiences and journey to becoming an advocate. Can you speak a little bit about the experiences that led you to become an activist and how the Walk for Justice came about?
Yeah, sure. So I went back to school. I always wanted to graduate. My lifelong dream was to be a lawyer. So after I got settled down in my little world there, I went back to school when I was 44. And so I was the oldest student in the class, needless to say, but I did succeed, and I graduated in 1999. And when I graduated from school, that basically gave me a voice, because it was then when I realized who I was, where I was from, my identity, because my identity had been stolen. been institutionalized since birth. And so when I got my voice in 1999, there was also another thing that was happening in Vancouver, and that was the fact that there was I was starting to recognize racism. I was always fully aware of it, but I didn't have the voice to speak out about it. So shortly after I graduated in Vancouver, um, I was kicked out of a mall for having dark skin. And so what I did was I was loud and proud by that time. And what I did was I launched a human rights case here with the BC Civil Liberties Union. My first intention was to go after the police officers who treated me like crap when I called upon them about this racist case. But that didn't work. I didn't get the police on that, but I did get the mall. And I proved for the first time ever in Canada in a human rights tribunal systemic racism. So that was a big move for me, and that took 4 years in the courts to succeed with that case, proving systemic racism. And then I did get the largest award ever given for injury to dignity in the Human Rights Tribunal. They awarded me $15,000. When previous to that, the highest award given was $2,500. But that was because it was a significant case. And ironically, just last week in our BC legislature, my case was mentioned in the legislature, and I was really proud of that because they're still talking about it. That was 15 years ago. So that's fine and dandy. And then, of course, my joy about winning that case was very short-lived because we won the case in July 2005 after 4 years of court proceedings. And in September 2005 was the date that my niece Marilyn Chipman disappeared. And of course, with the knowledge that I had from school and everything, and I didn't find out about it until November, but that just instantly lit a fire in me because I'd had time to spend with Tamara just a few short years before that, because I was up here in northern BC again, taking one of my abusers to court for sexual assault. And I had the opportunity of having Tamara, who would come over and visit me every day just to check on Auntie, see how she was doing. She knew what I was doing. And she came and we bonded pretty close for the year that I stayed here in Terrace with my kids. And Tamara was always over there. She understood and everything. So when she disappeared, I was watching what was going on. Internet was really new to me at that time too. And so November goes by, I'm hearing the news about everything, and then December goes by, and I really, really missed her. And everything was just kind of accumulating. I started hearing from other family members because downtown East Side Vancouver was my hangout. It was my home for the last 20 years off and on, so I knew a lot of people. And so as people know too, in Vancouver's downtown East Side, it's one of the used to be one of the best places to be homeless in the downtown East Side, Vancouver, particularly in the wintertime because of the weather. and it's the only city in Canada where the weather is a little bit tolerable for homeless people. And so already had a long history of spending a lot of time in the downtown east side, and that's where I was living when Tamara went missing. So we started doing search parties. My brother came down. We'd heard through the moccasin trail that somebody had spotted her in Vancouver. And I said to my brother, I don't know, because, if she was in Vancouver, my friends would have found her by now. So I really, really doubted it. But as it turned out, my brother ended up coming down, and my other brother was already here in Surrey. And so we did a 3-week grid search for her. And that was about the same time that I also I started getting familiar with some of the organizations in the downtown east side. I went to the downtown east side women's center, and all I was going to do was ask them if it was okay if I put Tamara's picture up on there, because I knew they had a big bulletin board there. And so I went in and I saw one of the workers, and I forgot to ask her anyway. At the end of the day, I didn't really get any help from her. But at the end of the day, I forgot to ask her if I could put the poster on, and I turned around and she was already gone, and there was Bernie Williams. And my little Bernie Williams, my little warrior woman. I just turned around and is it okay if I put this poster? And then I realized she wasn't there, and Bernie piped up right away. And she saw the picture and she started questioning me. She just started drilling, what's going on? And that was the first time that I'd ever laid eyes on Bernie Williams. And it ended up that Bernie and I became really fast friends. She was very much active already in the movement of the missing and murdered women downtown east side. Why we hadn't met previous to that, we have no idea, because we all had the same friends. And yet we never knew about each other. And so upon meeting Bernie Williams, I never looked back, because she was the one that gave me, and she mentored me, and she told me how to speak from my heart. She taught me the ropes on how to do public speaking. She literally threw me into it. And she's just a very, very smart woman. And when we became friends, we started realizing, because there was a lot of families that were also going to her. When a loved one went missing in Vancouver, they knew they could find her, and they knew that she would be able to do a grid search downtown east side. She was very well versed. She's been pretty much raised in the downtown east side and raised her children down there. And so when I realized this was coming up in 2007, we got the idea of the walks from a walk in 2006, at the beginning of 2006, where they had a symposium in Prince George, because there was people were noticing that there was an actual highway of tears, which is when it was coined back then for the Highway of Tears out of Prince George. They had just found a young girl, Althea Guiboche, that was found at 14 years old, and they found her body raped and beaten on the highway. And I think that was the last straw from Prince George, because previous to that, not many people were talking about the missing and murdered women. That's also the first time that I'd heard about Ramona Wilson being missing. And then all of a sudden, people were coming to us with the names. The families were coming us together with names. And when that happened, it lit a fire in me, and I realized that we needed to do something. And it didn't take long to realize that the government nor the police were interested in what we were talking about. So I felt, with the families giving me this message, we need a public inquiry. So I took that message very seriously. And come after the symposium they had in Prince George, they delivered their recommendations to the BC government because it was a provincial event. And then we got a new premier in there, and she wanted nothing to do with the Highway of Tears. She even had them destroy emails of from the Freedom of Information Act regarding anything with the Highway of Tears. So that told me that they were not interested in neither finding our loved ones nor finding the killers that are perpetrating on our women. So I just never looked back. I thought, no, you're not going to get away with this. There's far too many. And we ended up compiling a large database. We ended up organizing these walks because we wanted the national public inquiry. The families were really loud and clear about that. So that's why we walked, because we wanted our families' voices to be heard. We wanted our women's voices that were gone to be heard, and saying that we need to end this violence against our women, all women in this country. And that was the reason that we managed to pull these walks together, all by donation and volunteer. And it was predominantly the family members that were walking. They left their homes for 3 and 4 months at a time to continue to raise awareness, to fight for this national public inquiry. And today, well, we may have to do another walk because the government has stopped with the 231 calls to justice now sitting on their step, and they're refusing to move forward with it.
You spoke in our conversations about why it's so important to use the word genocide. Can you speak about that?
Yes, when I first started formulating, because I was told that I needed a mission statement, and I had a lot to think about and how to make it to make it short and sweet. And the only scenario that I could come up with is that on average, a First Nations woman will have 5 children in a lifetime. That's just our national average. Some have more. And it's in our history that they have more. But if you average it out, and at that time, they were talking about 500 women that were missing and murdered. So I sat there and I thought one day, gee whiz, if we're missing 500 women at this time, that means we're missing out on 2,500 children for our future generations. And that's when you put that word in there. That's genocide.
What can people that are listening do to support people like you who are working on the ground to end violence against missing and murdered, or to end the reality of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls throughout North America?
Well, I think that number one thing is if people are aware that there's some sort of violence happening within their communities towards women, or if they see something, or if they witness something, say something about it. Don't just say, well, that's none of my business. You know what? Because this is everybody's business. What happens in your community is your business. Do you want a safe community, or do you not want a safe community? Do you want your women to be safe? Do you want your girls to be safe? Do you want your daughters to be safe? Do you want them growing up so that they can be somebody when they grow up? You got to remember that these women are the life givers of society. Mm-hmm. And without these women, the men wouldn't be here. Mm-hmm. But speak up, especially against racism. We all breathe the same air. we all bleed the same blood. There's no difference between you and me. If we took our skin off, we'd all be the same color.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Gladys. I just wanted to invite people that are watching to submit questions in the chat. If you have any questions for Althea or Gladys or myself, please submit them in the chat, and we'd love to answer them. In the meantime, Althea, you mentioned that you're not operating Got Bannock at the moment, but I'd love to ask both of you. What can people, individuals, local governments do to better support the work that both of you have been engaged in? How could the city of Manitoba or the population of the province of Manitoba, the city of Winnipeg, or Winnipeggers in general better supported your efforts to run Got Bannock?
Well, when I did Got Bannock, I had it was all done on mostly donations from the public that wanted to support, and I encourage people to look around, to listen, to watch Facebook groups, pages, who are asking for donations. I know there was a huge effort in Winnipeg, just this cold snap. They put together a village at the Thunderbird House there. And so just to house the homeless people who are stuck outside, and just ask them, how can I help? Be an ally, go there to help without trying to take over or own someone else's work. That's pretty important, is that they allow, like, they let us do what we need to do, and not take it over, so to speak.
Yeah.
And call your politicians, call the ones who are making decisions, who will have the power over these decisions that can be, changed or made, or because they need to be held accountable for whatever they need to do, right? Because those are the ones who make policies, and they can create positive change. So yeah, that's what I think, and just always just be informed, ask questions. We're not shy to tell you how it is. Open your mind. Realize that we learn stereotypes and stigmas growing up, and you need to acknowledge that. Oh, like it bugs me when people are like so astonished that homeless people can be so achieved, that they can be musicians, they can be scholars, and they're like, wow, like because they're homeless, they don't know anything, and that really gets my goat. So I was just on Facebook there, and I noticed that Cindy Gladhue's murder has been charged with murder.
Yes.
So,
Guilty plea.
yeah, that's just breaking. I noticed the story on the families of Bridget, one of the posts. Anyway, I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Althea. And what about you, Gladys? How can listeners support grassroots Indigenous advocates working to end gender-based violence, or support you in the work that you do?
Yeah, like Althea says, a lot of our work is volunteer, and I think it would be a good idea to we have to educate our public to bring forward these issues to the politicians, because that's where everything is basically stopped. And I do the same thing here in December, and in the winter months, I bake and I cook, and I have people that will deliver the food to the homeless people, because many people tend to think that it's all First Nations people that are homeless. That's simply not true. Many people don't spend the time to find out even why these people are homeless for a reason. It isn't because they woke up one day and say, well, I don't feel like paying my bills, I'm going to go on the homeless road. That isn't what happened. Something happened in their lives to put them where they are. That's the same with when our girls decided, a lot of our young girls are accused of being prostitutes at young ages and everything. They didn't just wake up one day and decide they were going to be a prostitute. They were forced into that for some reason. We don't know what all of those reasons are, but we know that violence is usually the number one reason, and or alcoholism, or being raised in with drugs and stuff like that. We don't know their stories, but if they sat and listened to them and realized that these people were actually human beings and listened to their stories, they might get a little bit more understanding of their situation, and who knows, they might even be able to reach out and help them, opposed to giving them that stigma, or you're homeless, you're not worthy of anything. Everybody is worth something.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you got a roof over your head or not, everybody has value.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gladys. We only have a few more minutes. I wanted to just ask you both one final question. The name of the book, How We Go Home, it was initially the name of my thesis, and it was a very literal kind of title because I was interviewing people who left home to attend school and then moved home again. So it was how they moved home. But I was wondering if I could invite each of you to speak a little bit about what it means for you to go home, however you interpret that. And maybe I'll ask you, Althea, if you could share first.
Okay. So what I found was, by offering the Bannock, that it took the people that I was trying to help. It gave them a reminder of the homes that they used to have, the families they used to sit around the table with, that home hearth, that life. So to me, that became such the profound message that, like, I never said I was the best bannock maker in the world here, but the people named me Bannock Lady. They honored me. They gifted me that name, and I carry that name with honor. So that was the biggest thing, was in honor of the village we once had. I wanted to remind them of who we are, who we used to be, back to when we lived in a village, in teepees. We were all connected. We shouldn't be raising children alone. We should have aunties and uncles and cuckoos and chooms. Everybody should be raising this child with us. And today we're those circles, they've been broken. So it's up to us to bridge those gaps and recreate our circles, and we can do that. And just to remind us that we're all connected. We need each other to survive. Everybody's in survival mode. You're basically on your own, existing, and so they really got that message on the street. I just had to tell them that once, and they completely understood it.
Thank you, Althea.
Yes.
And Gladys?
How we go home, it's a loaded question because of all the atrocities and everything that we've been through. I think that what you've done with that title is you've led many roads through that, because everybody has a different way of going home. And for myself, it took myself being away from my family when I moved to Ontario, and having a heart attack and realizing that I could have never saw my kids again. So I told them that I needed, and they wanted me back home. So I came back home, not because I like it here, but because I needed to be close to my family, Althea knocked it right on the head when she's talking about family, because we need each other, and that's just the way our people are. And the one way that we can keep that bond with our people is simply by doing simple things like we do and giving bannock to our community. You know, that's part of our roots, you know, our bannock. You know, everybody knows that First Nations people make bannock, and sometimes it's a big competition. And same with our foods out in Saskatchewan. They got neck boat eating contests, you know, and stuff like that. And food for thought. These are our traditional ways. And it's a part of us that's not going to leave, because we know this, right? And it's going to take a lot of different ways for people to find their way back home, but it can be done. People have proven it over and over again. And I think right now the biggest push for people to go back home is to start building health, healing, and wellness centers right across the land. There's a lot of damage that's been done, and there's a lot of addictions out there that have been used as a mask to hide the pain that we are in. Health, healing, and wellness, education.
Thank you, Gladys. I want to thank you both so much for joining me on this journey, not just tonight, but, you know, over the last several years. I've learned so much from sitting with both of you, and it's always such an honor to listen to you speak and to you share your stories. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Sarah. It was an honor to be included in your book.
And on behalf of Town Hall Seattle, I just want to thank all three of you for presenting tonight. Thank you, Gladys and Althea, for your vulnerability and sharing your stories with us tonight, and for everything that you've done to overcome, you know, forces trying to destroy communities and spirits. And it's really inspiring. So thank you so much for sharing. And I want to thank the audience as well for watching tonight. I want to encourage you, if you're interested in purchasing a copy of How We Go Home, use the link on this live stream page down in the chat to purchase through Estelitas. They're our partner this evening. You know, check out our online calendar to see what's coming up next. So thank you all three again for presenting tonight with us, and I hope that you have a safe evening, and hopefully we'll be all together soon.
Thanks. Take care.
Thanks. Good night.